Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Sheri Giardini, and today I'm going to be reading a sermon written by the Reverend Andrew Weber called Put Something In. And a little bit about Reverend Weber first. Reverend Andrew Weber is the minister at the Thomas Paine UU Fellowship in Collegeville, Pennsylvania. He is a lifelong UU, raised in the suburbs of Philadelphia, where he attended mainline Unitarian Church. In his free time, he loves many forms of exercise and engages in home repair, spending time with his family, reading, discussing ethics, and camping. So put something in. What was well known thousands of years ago still rings true to us today and is witnessed to again in the contemporary prophet of Disney, producer of the movie Inside Out. So how many people here have seen this movie? Quite a few, okay. It's the story of a girl, Riley, who goes through the processes of moving to a new community and new school. The neat part of the movie is that as the wider narrative happens, we are given a glimpse of Riley's inner emotions and how they play out in her life. The movie is entertaining and puts faces to emotions. We all have times of sadness. We all have times of gladness. Times when we want to dance and times when we want to mourn. As with so much inspired and inspiring words, the text here transcends its container. Just as the message of Inside Out is much larger than the movie itself. The exact content of both Ecclesiastes is secondary to the truth that is shown. The simple and profound truth is that we have emotions, that we have different experiences in our lives, that we react differently to those different experiences. The spiritual practice this month is to bring joy into the places where you want to experience it. The question then is, what if you don't feel joy? How can we be authentic to ourselves and embody something we don't necessarily feel? Well, that's a great question. The first point I want to make is what the authors of Ecclesiastes and Inside Out both spoke to. That it is okay, normal, and good to feel different emotions. There is no emotion that is inherently bad or less valuable than the others. There are times when each is appropriate and healthy. If someone never feels angry, never feels happy, sad, or fearful, that might be a problem. Our imperative is to be able to recognize and live with our emotions. We aren't out to quash one emotion or another. It is good to be happy. It is good to be sad. There are times of hurt and time of healing. I do want to note that when I speak of sadness, I'm not speaking about clinical depression. If you are in a deep, dark place where no light ever penetrates, I encourage you to reach out and work on getting professional help. Depression is not something to be taken lightly or passed over. Watching the movie brought up some interesting spiritual practices that I think are powerful. One of them is the personification of each emotion, anthropomorphizing if you want a $10 word. Giving something human form which is not human, in this case, emotions. Personifying emotions can be a helpful approach because it is in line with both therapeutic and meditative approaches to mental health. When we name our emotions and see them as entities into themselves, it can help us because we are not defining ourselves by what we are feeling. Here is a practice I bring you adapted from the book, The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. The book is about the therapy approach ACT, or Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. The grounding for this therapy approach is firmly rooted in the spiritual practice of mindfulness. And it is with this mindfulness that we approach our emotions. The practice is as follows. When you have an emotion that you feel is negative, or one which you don't feel able to control, insert the phrase, "I am having the emotion that," instead of "I am angry," with the phrase attached, "I am having the emotion that I am angry." Now do that again, but with a slightly longer phrase. "I notice I'm having the emotion that," and see what happens. "I'm overwhelmed by sadness" becomes, "I'm having the thought that I'm overwhelmed by sadness," which becomes, "I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm overwhelmed by sadness." This is what meditation is all about. It's not about stopping the thoughts and emotions that continually pop into our heads. Meditation is about recognizing them and perceiving them without letting them rule our lives. There that thought of inadequacy goes again. Oh, and there is my anger and frustration coming up. The method of saying, "I'm noticing that I'm having the emotion that," is a great way to get started in stepping back from letting an emotion control our being. "I'm angry" defines me as angry. But noticing the thought in my brain allows me the chance to react differently without having the thought define me. From the simple exercise, we can all step back from and be mindful of thoughts and emotions which crop up. This plays into a Buddhist aphorism about mindfulness. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Simple, but extremely difficult, especially when you are hurt or are suffering. I can think of many times when my suffering didn't feel optional, and I bet you all can too. So what does this mean that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional? There are hardships in life. There are times when things don't go our way. There will be a time when our horse runs away. There is pain. It is inevitable. Our lives all have some pain. But suffering is different. Suffering is what we do with the pain that we have. As the Dalai Lama said, to a large extent, whether you suffer depends on how you respond to a given situation. We can sit with our pain, stew with our pain, let everyone know about our pain. We can create more suffering for ourselves, or we can choose to have a very different reaction. This is the part that is the hardest to hear, that suffering is optional. I take the advice of Dr. Viktor Frankl, a neurologist, psychiatrist, and a Holocaust survivor. In Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he states, "Everything can be taken from a man or woman, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." Frankl has a certain clout in saying this, having lost all of his possessions, family, and friends in World War II. Frankl had everything taken from him, everything. And he still says that human beings have the freedom to choose their reaction. We can always choose our attitude. Getting to a place where we can say with wholehearted conviction, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, takes work and time. But choosing our attitude is a way we can live in gratitude. There isn't one easy and quick way to be more mindful of our gratitude and joy. The practice that I shared of noting our emotions, that is one way. An important thing to remember is that it's not so much what happens to us as how we interpret what is happening. We all experience both heartache and jubilation. The difference is how we choose to react. So I've been sort of going around the topic of today without actually saying an answer. Can we bring joy into situations where we want to experience joy? My answer is a resounding yes. A resounding but qualified yes. The qualification that we first and foremost need to be true to ourselves. I don't agree that it is a good practice to fake it until you make it, that by just putting on a happy face and ignoring hurt will make you joyful. I believe that we must be true to ourselves. And being true to ourselves means noticing and living with our feelings, not ignoring them. That's the qualification, that there is a time to be happy and there is a time to be sad. Also from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Getting to that space within our minds, within our lives, this constitutes a practice. Getting our minds used to focusing on the blessings and joys in our lives, constantly coming back to positive interactions in our relationships. None of this is one and done, but rather a litany of positivity. When we use a good pathway, that pathway becomes easier to use. Our brains will be more positive. Our actions will be more positive. We get more used to focusing our thoughts and actions toward good. For better or worse, emotions and actions are contagious. It's up to us what we want to promote. And the emphasis of my answer of yes is that we can all work on cultivating mindfulness, on creating and sustaining the space between emotion and reaction. That we can be mindful about what reality we are creating and the world we are bringing into being. It is true that we make our own reality, especially with how contagious emotions are. Coming into a space thinking that it will be a negative space might very well make it true. Coming into a space thinking it will be a positive space might very well make it true. My charge to myself and to you is twofold. A twofold and seemingly conflicting charge. Be true to yourself and bring the joy. May it be so. So if you can, please rise in body or spirit.